I'm your host, Sean McKenzie. Thanks for joining me once again on my channel on data engineering. In this episode, we go back to our Microsoft Access playlist. We're going to talk about how to send email from your Access application using VBA. Now, this is very handy, and there's many ways that you can send email from VBA, and this is just one, but I find that this is one that has been the most handy for my projects. And so without further ado, let's get to our sending email from VBA. Interested in coaching or one-on-one help on your project? Make sure to check out my Patreon. The link is in the description below. Okay, so I'm going to start off our example here, and I'm using the same file that we've been using for some other examples. I'm just going to create a new table, and we're going to put our email entries in here, because what we want to show is how to send some email from a whole bunch of table entries, or you could send them from a form. The form would probably have the data that came from tables, and so we're just going to send a couple of entries that came from a table as an example, so that you can see how this might work in real life if you were storing the email information in a table. So I'm just making a simple table here. It's going to have a to from, CC, a body, and we'll need a subject, and that should do it, I think, for now. And so I'll save that, and that's got all the stuff we need there. So yeah, I'll just hit save, and we'll call it like email to send or something like that, and I'll hit OK, and this asks me if I want to add the primary key. I can say yes, because I already created an auto number there, so it's going to automatically put that primary key on there for me. We always want to have a primary key in our table, and that's going to get us ready to go to start sending some emails. So I'll put some data in there. Let's do that. We'll just put in some test data. I'll use my own email address for the site there. So info at McKenzieMcKenzie.com, and then we'll send that from admin at billzone.com, and then we'll put our CC as admin, or no CC. We'll leave that empty for now, and that'll be a good example of how to handle a null value, and then we'll put some information in for our email body and subject, and that'll get us ready. And I'll do the same for our second row. I'll put our info email in there, and I'll do our from email, and I'll put a CC in on this one actually, just so that we can show how that is working. So I'll CC back to the admin account, and then I'll say another test message, and test 2, and that should be enough for us for now. That table has a couple of entries in it. We're good to go. So I'll close the table, so we have a couple entries in there, and now I'll go to our design view. Actually, I'm going to add a date sent, or a sent date, and that's going to allow us to see which ones have been done and which ones have not been done, so that each time we run our procedure, we don't want to rerun and resend the same emails again. We just want to send ones that have not been sent yet. So any ones that don't have a sent date on them, those will be the ones that we send in our procedure. So as you can see, I used create and then module on the ribbon toolbar there, and that gave me the Visual Basic for Applications window, and I hit Control S to save it, and then I just saved it as our email module, which you can see underneath there. You can see our table too. So now we have two objects that we're working with that have the name email in them. You can see them in the navigation window below, and this is our VBA window that we're going to do some VBA in to do automation and to send emails. So I'm going to create a subroutine. I'll call it send mail, and we're going to have some arguments for our function. we're going to have a from argument, a to argument. We'll have a CC argument if we want to add a CC on our email, and a subject and a body. And those few arguments should be enough to do a simple email. You can also, if you can start exploring, you'll see that there's also, a priority that you can send. You can send high priority email that shows up with a little exclamation in their inbox and stuff like that. But these are kind of like the basics for sending an email using VBA. And so I'll create a mail object. I'm not going to put a data type on it or a type on it. And then I'm going to create a URL string. So I'm just going to make a string variable. I'm going to put this Microsoft schemas string in there. That's been used for a very long time. And we're actually going to concatenate that with some different variations of it so that we can set the fields on our CDO message configuration. And so what I'll do is I'm going to use I'll use with, and so that I don't have to type in obj mail every time, obj mail. I'll just say dot from is equal to our string from variable, dot to is equal to our to variable, and our dot cc is equal to the cc variable, and our HTML body is equal to the body string. We'll need our subject as well. I'll go ahead and put that in. I'll jump up a line here and I'll put the subject is equal to our string for subject, and all of these, of course, we're passing into our procedure from somewhere else. So we're going to call this this one sub, and it's going to send one email with all the the variables that we tell it to. And we'll do the same thing. We'll use with for our field setup, and we'll use end with so that we can just say dot item for each line, which makes it a lot easier than typing in our mail object dot configuration dot fields dot item on every line. We can just say dot item. And so what we're going to do is we're going to concatenate our URL, and we're going to put our sort of like our setting value in there for as a concatenation. So we're going to put URL concatenated with send using and set that equal to 2, which is for port sending. So we're going to specify an SMTP port. We'll put in the SMTP server, and we'll set that equal to my mail server, which is smtp.billzone.com. And I need to fix that. And it looks like I was missing my the quote on my SMTP server variable. And then I added dot item URL SMTP server port, which is 2525. For many of you, it will just be 25, which is the SMTP sort of default port. And but in this case, mine is 2525. Our URL and SMTP authenticate. In my case, I need the basic authentication. You may need more sort of in-depth authentication for your email sending, so you might want to investigate some of the other types. And I'll put my username, which is actually the same as my from variable in my case, the username for the server, and then the password, which I've set up somewhere else so that nobody can see it, is just a global constant, and I've set that to email underscore password as the name of that variable. You'll put your own password in there, of course, and that will give you everything that you need in order to actually just send an email, send a basic email using SMTP, and that's really going to sort of help you get going there. So once we've got all of our items in there, we're going to put an update on our statement, or pardon me, in our procedure, so that all the configuration fields get updated, and that's really gonna sort of that's gonna save that so that it'll help us to send an email message. We'll put a send on our mail object after we've said all that stuff, and we put a debug.print sent on the end of that so that it'll tell us that it actually got to the end of our procedure. You will probably want to put error handling around all of this, but this is sort of just to help you see how the basic mechanisms work for sending an email. So I'll go ahead and go into the immediate window, and I'm going to sort of call the subroutine by just saying send mail, and then I'll just hard sort of plunk in my arguments so that I can test it out. So I've got admin@billzone.com from, which is the from. I've got info@mackenzie.com 2, empty CC, test message 1, and then check out my test message as the body. And that'll be pretty easy. You just hit enter at the end of that, and you can see it says that it sent it. So I'll go and I'll just grab my my mail client here and see if that actually went in there. So this is the mail received in my sort of web browser based client here, and it got that first message. So I could go ahead and I could sort of change things around if I wanted to. I could say, hey, test message 2, and then change the body of the message. I could try something. Maybe I could even put in some HTML. So I could, you can put a full HTML, document starting with and ending with HTML tags and a header and all that stuff. But you can actually just generally put in some loose HTML without all of that stuff. If you want to do some formatting, you can, I'll put a line break in there with some bold, and then a couple line breaks, and then I'll put some just basic text after that, just to show how this can work with HTML, input, and it goes in just the same. I hit enter, and that's gonna execute that procedure, and it did so. And so I'll go ahead and grab my mail client again, and let's just see. So that's the first message. I'm just gonna do a send and receive and check my messages and scroll up here to see if I can. Oh, there we go. Test message 2. So it did the bold, and it came through with a couple of line breaks, and so you can see. So you can actually do some really cool stuff with HTML in there, with HTML mail, and that's going to be really cool. The subject is up at the top, and that's exactly what we wanted to see. So that's all fine and dandy, that we can send it, with one sort of sub. But what if we want to send from a table? So you might have, an alert table. People are using your application, and an alert goes, and you plunk an email record into this table so that you can queue all your mail sending or something like that. And so we've created our table, which we did in the very beginning, and we'll create another sub called send mail from table. And in this case, what we're going to do is create a couple of variables, one for our database, one for our record set that we're going to open up. I'll create a simple SQL string just to say, hey, we're going to select this, these records from this table. And then we'll create our from and to variables, and CC, and our subject and body variables, which we're going to load from a record set that we're going to open up. Now my coding is a bit verbose. I like to create variables and load them and then use the variables. You can certainly just plug in the values straight from the table, as you'll see here coming up, but I find that it's easier to debug if I have variables that I can see what's going on. So I'll set my database equal to current DB, and then I'll set my SQL string, select star from email to send, where sent date is null. So if the sent date has no value yet, you might have had some procedure that said, hey, do a notification, put all the email information into the table with the sent date equal to null, and now we're going to pick up that record or records, and we're going to say, hey, everything with sent date equal to null or is null, then you can basically loop through those records and send an email for each one. That needs an is null up above there. I'll go and fix that in a minute here. And so we'll do set RST equal to db.openRecordSet. We'll put our SQL string and our db.open dynaset, because we're actually going to change the values in this record set. And if you're using a SQL Server link table, you should use that dbc changes option, because it will allow your record set to see what's going on as you make changes to the SQL Server record, the record set that you've got open, and instead of sort of leaving you hanging. You don't need it on an access table, but if you do have an SQL Server link table for this, make sure you use that dbc changes option. And so now what I'll do is I'll go do until rst.eof, which is end of file. So we're just going to start this going here, and we're going to load up our variables from the record set. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the nz, which is sort of like the null zero, I call it, function, which will basically, it's like a coalesce. If you're familiar with TSQL, if we have a null value in there, and I'm just going to look at the names of the fields here so that I can see. I think it's email to, email from, email cc, body, sub. Okay, so going back to it, so if I'm looking at the record set and I say, hey, give me the value email from, if it passes me a null value, then it'll change it to an empty string. And I should have put an equal there. Instead of trying to load a string variable with null, which is something that you cannot do, will throw an error. So we'll load our to variable from the email to field. Again, if it's null, it'll pass back an empty string. If the cc, same thing for the cc variable, the subject variable, and then finally the body variable, which has the body text in it. And so we finish with our body string here for the body of the email, and that'll be rst.emailBody or exclamation email body. And now I'll look at the table just to see, these are the values that we should see in our emails. These are obviously different than what we did in the immediate window that you saw earlier. So we should see these messages go through this time. Although I'm not going to put the send mail just yet. I'm going to run this procedure just to see that the logic will work before I actually send the mail from it, to make sure that everything works. So I won't take that send mail just yet in our loop. We'll leave that until after we run it, just to make sure that it will run through those records properly. We'll add a counter, so we'll make it a long integer, and I'll set it equal to 0 in the beginning of our procedure, and I'll increment it here just after our body string. And then we're also going to want to update the record, or the row that we're looking at. We're actually going to update that to set the sent date equal to the current instant, so we'll use now. And we'll also debug.print after our loop. We'll use that counter, and we'll say, hey, this is the number of emails that we sent. So this is what the loop looks like so far. I sort of checked it for errors using the debug compile. it goes do until end of file of the record set, and then we'll definitely want to add a move next at the end of our of our loop, because if you don't put that in, it's going to sit on the first row and it's going to go forever in an never-ending loop, which will lock up your computer or crash. It'll look like it's crashing. So make sure that you put a move next as the very last sort of statement, usually the very last statement in the loop, and then we'll make sure we close our record set. That we're also going to need to do that, and we'll set our variables equal to nothing to release the resources on those, and we'll also go back. Like I said, we're going to go up and we're going to edit that. We're going to edit that record as well. But first, let's run it just so that we can see that it goes through the record set. You can add error handling if you want to. I just want to see if this will run through before I do any editing on the table or anything. I'm just going to say send mail from table. Note that I have not used the send mail function yet. I did not put it in our procedure just yet. I want to just make sure that this loop will go. It'll say 0 email sent. That's because of that null. It needs to be is null. Is null up there instead of equal null. You can't have equal null in SQL. It's my bad. And as I mentioned, we will also go ahead and we're going to edit this record as it's open on this one particular record. That we're going to send an email. We're going to say that the sent date is equal to now. So we'll say rst.edit. That sort of opens the command to edit it, and we'll say rst sent date is equal to now, and then we'll say rst.update, and that'll update that record as it's on it, and then it'll move to the next record for sort of like the next row there. So I'll remove that 0 email sent. Now we can see if I run it, it says 2 emails sent, even though we did not put in the actual send command yet. I just want to make sure that loop is working, and as you can see, it's gone through and it's run through correctly. So now we can add our send email. Now you can see that if I open the table, you can see the sent date was populated, which is what we want our procedure to do as it went through, and so that's good. So it looks like the loop works before we've actually put our send email in there. So we're going to go ahead and grab our code again. I'll delete that stuff from the immediate window, and we'll go ahead and we're going to add our send email function now. We'll put send mail in there, and we've loaded all our variables, so we know that they're all strings. They are not going to throw an error based off of that, unless of course you don't put a 2 in there or something like that, email 2. But for the most part, it looks like we've got all our variables the way that we want them, and so we can say send mail in our application right before we do our edit, saying that we sent it. And now that means we sent it, but keep in mind that email is a best effort service, which means if email servers are overloaded, they will not deliver messages sometimes. I went back to the table there and I deleted the sent date from those records, as you can see there, so that they will show up in our query. And so now we have a complete procedure here that will send email, and we'll do send mail from table, and we'll run that one. So as you can see, we got our sent notification twice as the procedure was called each time through the loop. We had 2 records in there, and then it said, hey, 2 emails were sent. That was the last debug.print. Now I can go ahead. This is our previous message in my mail client. If I go and I do a send and receive, you can see that we did get our messages. There's the new email message. If I go up to the top of my received, there's my test 2 with another test in the body. And if I open up that the table now, you can see that is the text from our email records, and you can also you could see that the date was filled in there for the sent date, and that's how you can send email in Access VBA using CDO. Hope you enjoyed today's discussion on how to send email from your Access application. If you like what you saw today, please give the video a thumbs up. Make sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed yet. Click the bell when you see the bell, and if you have any questions or comments, put those in the comment section below. Have a great day, have a safe day, and I'll catch you next time.